wow.
Anyway, thanks for
You went
joining
there
us on
straight
the.
away.
Oh, you might as well go there just as an icebreaker. But James Golding, mate, thanks for jumping on the podcast. You're the last GRM driver to join us, but we're probably saved the best for last. So, how have you been, mate?
Awesome, mate. Good as gold. Good to be back doing a few races.
Yep.
Out of the COVID lifestyle. So yeah, it's.
What was COVID like for you?
Just stuck at my place. And just doing sim stuff. Really, was probably the main thing I was doing.
Yep.
Kept all the training up. I've got a home gym and stuff here, and also actually started a new business, making these go-kart parts.
Oh yeah. That's the chord.
Yeah, it's just a little seat adjustment system that allows you to move the seat easier, pretty much. So you can do it in between practices or qualifying, all that sort of stuff.
Anthony's going to buy your product, mate. Look at him.
Is that what they've put on the haven't they put those now on like the new DPE carts or the Tony carts, the adjustable seat?
I don't think so. Nah, but actually DPE is going to be a sole distributor of our parts soon.
Oh wow!
So
and you came up with
first.
that. You came up with that design yourself.
No, I shouldn't take all the credit for it because it was actually my kart mechanic Johnny. He a couple of years ago, because I've been racing KZ2 for the last couple of years, and a couple of years ago he thought my seat wasn't in the right spot, and he thought, we're just going to fish around trying to find the right spot. So he made up these brackets. And when we went and tested it, I actually won the last round at that same track, went there, tested it, moved it 15 mil. 15 mil? Yeah, 15 mil. Backwards, and went like 3/10 quicker. Right away. So
15 mil, what a difference.
Yeah. And it's sort of one of them things no one really changes because they just get the dimensions from the manufacturer and, just bolt it in and leave it there. But everyone's different size, different driving style, different classes on different tyres and all that sort of stuff. It's something you really got to get right first and then build the rest of the cart around it.
How much will they cost?
They retail at from 350 to 400.
You found something
that's
for
where
Anthony to spend his money on.
Yeah.
Might take
Maybe
him
that's
from
where you're going to find the
27th up to
time,
19th
Anthony.
of the grid.
That's where I'm going to go from 17th to 15th, boys. Anyway. All right, let's get into something proper. So, James, thanks for joining us again. What we like doing on the pod, apart from talking about racing, is actually talking to some of the, I say young and upcoming, but you've been a pretty household name in Australian motorsport for the last half decade or so now. But just give us your story into motorsport, kind of who your key factors that helped you move up the ranks and just your story to getting where you are today.
Yep. Pretty much all started when I went to watch my cousins race karts back in 2004, I think it was, 3 or 4. And I did have motorbikes up until that stage, but my old man asked if I wanted to get into it. So I bought a couple of karts, started racing. Then my sister started racing, and we're all traveling around Victoria pretty much. Dad pulled the pin, concentrated on me and my sister, and then soon after she pulled the pin, and I basically kept going from there into Formula Ford. And I pretty much dropped out of year 10 or the end of year 10. I just didn't really go back. As I started Formula Ford and started to do a bit of work at the team I was racing with, which was Borland's. Started working there, and I was pretty good mates with Scott McLaughlin just through karting. And I was talking to him a little bit, and I tried to get into GRM and see if I could start working there. And the combination of Scotty and also my next door neighbour's grandfather was best mates with Garry. So
Mhm.
those two things combined, yeah, got me in there, and I started an apprenticeship working there as I was racing Formula Ford, and
So
yeah, then
fabrication.
no, mechanic. So
Okay.
yep, so qualified mechanic now, and
So
yeah,
was
then got the opportunity to do Super 2, and pretty much all stemmed on from there really.
was
But
was Scotty doing his apprenticeship at the same time when you were talking to him about?
yeah, he was. So when I started mine, I think he was in his last third or fourth year of his fitting and turning, I think it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, well they're every day together working, so good fun.
So you're gonna get him to talk to Roger Penske about getting you a drive in IndyCar sometime soon?
I've asked him if it's going to work out the same way, but
Mhm.
I don't think it's quite as easy this time around.
I think
No, so
Davidson's getting a little bit long in the tooth, so maybe he'll drop off the radar for DJR, and then you can push your way into there.
Happy to, mate. Happy to.
Well,
You just let him know.
well, let's segue then into your supercar career. I mean, obviously, the first time I heard of you was in Super 2. It might have been through that. I think, did you run a Garth Tander tribute livery in Super 2 once?
I ran I did run an old GRM livery, but I don't think it was Tander.
A Tander one. Well, it must have been just an old livery, because I remember that was the first time that I noticed you purely because of the name on the door.
Yeah.
And then I kind of did a little bit of not research, but just stalking. I just ended up thinking, I like this guy because he's got a sick helmet, which is always a good place to start. But you work for GRM, you do Super 2, have some success in there, and make your way into the main game. Just explain that whole situation to us. And obviously, you were in a pretty interesting position where you had some levels of success. You kind of looked like you were building a career in supercars, and then it was all just like taken away from you, essentially through no fault of your own. So what was that whole
Yeah.
experience
So
like for you?
for me, prior to Super 2, when I was in Formula Ford, we were sort of trying to work out what our plan was, where we're going to head. Actually going to the US was pretty much the way we were leaning towards, going over to race USF 2000 and
Oh wow.
try and work up through into IndyCar through those four or three
Peters.
feeder categories. And it actually, we were leaning towards that way, and we thought, look, if we go over and we win, you can get the scholarship thing and go up to the next category. If we go over and goes well, we'll keep going. If it doesn't, we probably only had enough money to do 1 year, I reckon, and then that would have been it. Come home. But before we actually got to attempt it, Garry offered to put me into Super 2 program for a couple of years with the plan of moving to main game.
So sorry, just to cut you off for a second, was the reasoning behind that move just essentially because it was a category that you were interested in more, or from a financial point of view, was it just more viable, the American route, as opposed to doing Super 2?
Yeah, it pretty much was. Yeah. I mean, it's not like it's a cheap thing to do, but still, with that scholarship thing, the opportunity to get a fair whack of the budget paid for
Covered.
and go to the next category each year, you win. That was pretty much my best option for becoming a professional driver. But yeah, as I said, Garry sort of gave us the opportunity to go to Super 2 and then progress through to Supercars, which didn't quite go exactly to plan, because it was actually 20, what was that, 20?
19?
Nah, prior to that, so 2017, I was supposed to replace McLaughlin when he went to Penske. That was actually in my contract to go to the the main game that year, but Garth Tander become available, and GRM didn't want to miss the opportunity of getting him back. So I had to hold my breath for a whole another year, which was probably the worst, the worst thing.
Who was his partner for the first year? Was it Wall or was it Moffat?
Moffat,
Moffat, okay.
yeah, Moffat.
They both
And
hard.
anyway, we pressed on, did the enduros with Garth and did a few wild cards, got the highest finishing position out of any wild card. Then went into main game. You know, first year's always tough as a rookie going in, and really started to find my feet towards the end of the year. Obviously, the team wasn't super strong like they were when we had the Volvos. But yeah, towards the end of that year, it was really tit for tat with me and Garth. And, you know, whether we were 12th and 11th or 20th and 21st, it was still tit for tat. And how competitive I was against him towards the end of the year, I was pretty happy with. And then obviously all fresh for 2019 with Boost coming on board. New teammate Richie Stanaway, which I really had a lot of fun driving with. He's an awesome dude and really skilled driver as well. And then it all sort of ended a bit unexpectedly. It was meant to go for another year with the Boost deal and all the rest of it. But it pretty much GRM decided to withdraw from Supercars. Mainly because Boost were withdrawing. Garry did sit me down and say, if you want to keep going, we'll run one car, probably with Valvoline, and press on. And at that time, 2019, which we did really struggle, it was the time when GRM were building all the TCR cars and S5000 cars. And it pretty much was me and my race engineer working on the supercars, trying to find improvements and ways to go faster. And everyone else in the workshop was working on TCR and S5000.
Yeah.
So it wasn't easy. We probably held our ground relatively well considering, but I pretty much said to Garry, you know, unless there's going to be fundamental changes with engineering and all that sort of stuff, then there's not really much point continuing on. He said, fair enough. Well, we're not changing any of that because we're focused on doing these new categories. So that's when I decided to try and go down a different route, get in a good team co-driving, and try and work my way into a team that way rather than go to a bottom team, race main game for a year or so, and then you're still at the back and you're done, sort of thing, nail in the coffin.
So sorry,
But-
just to clarify, you're saying the year that you were with Boost in the Supercars Championship, most of the team already transferred to working on TCR and S5000. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
It was just okay, fair enough.
Yep.
And how did you? And that was still your best year in terms of points in the championship, because you still every year got better and better in points. So you're saying even though you went better in points, you were still running off like a major skeleton staff for like that Supercars team. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
I mean, we weren't, at the track and that, obviously it was all hands on deck, but in between rounds where, you know, say a team like Triple Eight's got 8 engineers working full time, coming up with new parts for the cars and finding ways to go faster. And whereas we had me and my race engineer, and everyone else was building TCR and S5000 cars, designing them. And then to get to the point, okay, we've got to put the supercars together, and we just ran the same setups and all that sort of stuff, and there was no development anywhere.
Was that
Yeah.
a reason for Boost to leave?
I think yes, it was. So it was lots of things that caused GRM to withdraw from supercars, but at the same time, I don't really blame them. It just got too expensive for what it is. Problem with supercars in my opinion, is that it costs too much to run for the year, and the money that they get back from TV and sponsors isn't enough to cover the budget. And particularly sponsors, they're trying to sell signage on the car that's not worth that amount. So it's teams, which all the teams you would realise have got other sources of income, whether they run other race cars, do other engineering and those sorts of things. Obviously, Triple Eight make a lot of different stuff.
Walk
Yeah,
control,
so
have
they've
their
all
walk
got
control division, I suppose.
yeah, 100%. So they've all got
Okay.
something else to keep them fueled. But it's all comes down to because Supercars isn't really a well-oiled machine at the moment.
What
So what do
Do you
you
have a-
think of Gen 3 in terms of fixing some of that problem? We're gonna here now.
I think from what I've heard, it's going to be much better in terms of cost running the cars, but the cost to build the cars is going to be no different.
Okay.
So upfront and getting going, first year is going to be no different, and then again, yeah, they shouldn't take as much money to service and that sort of thing, but we don't know if they break it, do we?
Okay.
That's interesting point. So can I just double back on what you were saying before? Do you have like a ballpark figure for how much
Here we go.
it costs? I love this whole idea because no one that isn't in the sport actually knows. Do you have a ballpark figure for how much it does cost to take a supercar racing?
Yep. So to build a supercar's around $700 unless you buy it off Triple Eight and they
$700.
charge you extra.
Let's go, boys.
$700,000. $700. Yeah,
Yeah.
Are you guys going to race this year? or-
Yeah, I reckon.
It's half your seat clips, mate. It's half your seat clips.
700,000 to build a car, and then a season. Most teams, yeah, you'd be lucky to get through a season on 1.5 mil.
Mm.
For a bottom team, and then the top teams would be spending 4 to 5, I reckon, per car.
Well,
Per car.
what if you're a team like BJR that's smashing them every other weekend?
Well, they're lucky because they've got a lot of cars. They've got a lot of drivers in, say, Super 2 and that sort of thing that are paying. But it all would probably come out in the wash pretty evenly. I don't think there'd be
Making a
too
whole
much
lot.
profit there. Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. And then just for comparison's sake, one of those drivers that's doing Super 2 and is being funded, through their sponsors or whatever that might be, how much
Yep.
would that? How much would a Super 2 season cost the driver?
Super 2's anywhere from 4 to 800, depending which team.
Wow, 800,000.
Yep.
Okay, for the whole year.
Yep.
Okay.
That's 7 rounds, I think, 7 or 8 rounds.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I mean, the biggest expenses are still comes down to wages and accommodation and flights, really.
Mm. Yeah.
Personnel is still the biggest expense out of all of it.
That seems to
You
be a
still-
common denominator amongst a lot of the people that we talk to.
Do you work for GRM, James, or you just race for them now?
Just race for them now, yeah. Just
Okay,
in
yeah,
the
okay.
S5000 and getting back on talking about how it ended. It sort of, for me, it was difficult because I really did catch that break and got the opportunity with
Mhm.
GRM to get in full time and be a professional driver. And then when they pulled out of the sport, it kind of left me in this zone where I had to find another way to get back in there. And the more that I've gone on and learnt, the more it's relying on sponsors and that sort of thing. So I've had to work so hard at that when I've never really, I had a few smaller sponsors in Formula Ford and that sort of thing, but nothing major like a lot of the drivers are bringing now to the teams. So I'm having to work hard on that when that sort of didn't really get me to this point. It was because Garry picked me up on the way through that led me to that point. So I'm having to try and fast track and learn all this other stuff to get back into where I think I
Yeah.
belong.
How hard
how
is
about-
it coming through is it for a driver to source those sponsors? Because you hear that people are struggling with it all the time.
Yeah, it's always difficult. It's more difficult when, as I said, with supercars, the price that you've got to come up with, the budget that you've got to come up with, the TV exposure and all that sort of thing really doesn't give the value enough to charge that much. So that's where the difficult part is, and that's why the teams are relying on drivers bringing sponsors through, because they know the drivers' sponsors are predominantly there for them, and they're not too overly worried about the exposure and stuff they're going to get. They're more supporting that driver, and they know that they can get a smaller space and get more money for it because they know they want that driver in there, and that's how that fills up the gap in the budget. So that's why a lot of teams are relying on that. But it's across the board. It's all motorsport really. Some are healthier than others, and that's pretty much the reason why GRM chose to get out of supercars. But they did say that they're not against coming back to supercars. It'll just have to be the right
The
time.
right circumstances.
Yeah.
So now that you're the reserve driver for Team 18 for Mark Winterbottom it was last year, right? How has it been working for in a totally new team environment, albeit only for 1 weekend? I think it was a year now. Well, there was only one endurance race last year, right?
Yeah, one endurance race since COVID,
Yeah.
which is pretty annoying.
Yeah.
Missing out
Did
on
you just get-
Sandown and Gold Coast.
You just get 2 test days with them and then the race weekend.
Yeah, probably in the car 4 to 5 times, to be honest. A few ride days thrown in there as well.
Yeah.
It's not too bad, but just the one race, particularly like last year when me and Scotty had the power steer fail.
Mm.
You know, one race a year, it's all over, and you got to wait a whole year again. So that was unfortunate, but yeah, really loving working with them. They're great bunch of people to be around. Everyone's really friendly and gets along well. There does happen to be a few people from GRM there now, so that makes life a bit easier as well. But yeah, really enjoying it. Still working hard to try and get back in full time. Most of it is off the track, and with the one race a year, it doesn't really rely on that. Everyone knows within supercars where I've been and what I've done, so it's about trying to get a deal together and be in the right place at the right time when something does become available. A lot of guys, you know, seem to pick up something, being in the right place at the right time. Might not come down to money, might not come down to sponsorship or skill. Yeah, once the door opens, if you're there ready to go, they're going to pick you. If you're all over the place, well, you know that everyone's sort of got someone within their team that they would put in next or in the back of their mind. They're not going to just start ringing up people and, you know, go through the list. So it's about trying to cement your place somewhere. That's the way I think it has to be done anyway.
So when you were hearing that Scott Pye and Triple Eight at Team 18 hadn't signed a new deal at the end of last year, were you kind of ticking over a little bit?
Yeah,
they-
I was just knocked on Charlie's front door a few times.
What?
How about you grass for free?
Yeah. Look, it's certainly a place I'd like to drive full time. Frosty's getting older now. He's possibly close to retiring. You'd hope. But who knows? I mean, if I was him, I'd like to be driving the new car next year, and he's still relatively competitive, and yeah, I
How close,
suppose.
on a realistic level, like since you did leave, were there any like opportunities that kind of opened up for you to get back into the main game, and then it kind of just didn't end up working out in the end? Like, how close have you been?
I've been pretty close a couple of times. And on multiple occasions, one was something I turned down in a team that I didn't think was going to be worthwhile. In
You
our
can tell us
last
now,
year,
was it Team Sydney?
maybe.
Mm.
In our
Okay,
last
stand
year
out.
at GRM where we were struggling, it wasn't somewhere that I felt that I was progressing. So being in that position, I just don't think it's worthwhile. I mean, that left me without a drive. So going to somewhere that's going to be the same thing's just going to do the same. Leave me
Yeah.
somewhere without a drive. So I'm better off trying another avenue. But yeah, the other ones I did come close for this season. But yeah, it unfortunately come down to someone else having a little bit more money.
Can I have another guess?
Sponsorship. Hey,
Can I have another guess?
yeah,
Does it have anything to do with undies?
undies.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Oh, mate, because if it did, he's been shocking for me this year. Anyway, all good. Okay. So let's get.
I have a question.
Let's
I
go,
have a question.
yeah, I'll throw a question in, Joe.
So we were talking to Nathan Hearn a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that he's racing in S5000, but the one thing S5000 doesn't give you is a super license, but you've got that super license. So I suppose for you, you can race in S5000 and you still can dabble in supercars where at the moment that isn't an avenue for a few of the other blokes. That's right. Is that right? Is that correct?
It was right, but they've actually changed the rules and now there's no, I don't think there's a super license anymore. It's just, or maybe, sorry, it is super license, but the point system's changed. It's not as hard to get, but you still have to have a nomination from a supercars team to say that
Okay.
you're capable of driving, basically.
Okay.
That's probably a good segue to move into the second or the last few years of your career now in S5000. And I think it's pretty clear and obvious to see that as far as from a fan's point of view, S5000 has definitely captured the heart of an imagination of the fans. So what is so good about that category from your point of view? And then also particularly, how have you enjoyed the racing up front? Because I think there's no argument that the racing between yourself and Joey Mawson and even Aaron Cameron when he was racing in the Tasman series last year, it's top class.
Yeah, it's comes down to the cars. They're just a real raw race car. There's no driving aids, no power steering, no ABS, no traction control, all that sort of stuff. And it's a big, heavy race car. It's not really a traditional open wheeler. It obviously on paper it's an open wheeler and looks like it from the outside, but driving it's not the traditional open wheeler driving style. It's a heavy race car. You've really got to slow it down to make the apexes, and it's on a harder tire compared to, say, supercars, for example. But the area where they do find the speed in comparison to supercars is, say, 1 to 200. The acceleration's a lot faster because they are 500 kilos lighter. But in terms of the slow speed corners, which would probably surprise a lot of people, the mid corner speeds are actually pretty much identical to a supercar, no faster at all. It's all made up from 100 to 200, and obviously high speed corners because we've got a fair bit more aero.
Yeah. So,
But yeah, sorry, keep going.
So I was just thinking about I mean, it's still a fairly short history, the history of S5000, but I think the first year or so that it was introduced, there was a lot of young drivers that had come into the category from whatever it was, Australian Formula 3, that were kind of filling up the grid. But I feel like that you see less really young drivers in the, I mean, obviously you've got, is it Nagatoa from New Zealand, Cooper
Yeah.
Webster, but there's less really young drivers in the category. Is that purely, do you think, based on the fact that it is such a different driving style and it isn't essentially a kid's car, just because of
Yeah,
the power of them?
I think so for sure. I mean, they've proven how difficult they are to drive. Will drive fast anyway. By so many incidences and people coming off the track and yeah, they're a beast of a car, which is why it's not for the faint-hearted. A lot of these young guys are coming in, and it's a pretty big step from anything they've ever driven before. But I think that's why also I've taken to it pretty well, is because of the way you got to handle it. Being a heavy race car, it's very similar to a supercar in many ways. And on the other hand, the open wheel side of it, I only did Formula Ford open wheels, which have 0 aero. And that hasn't sort of held me back by any means. And obviously Joey Mawson, he's come from complete open wheeler background.
He picked it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, so the other guys, to be honest, Cooper Webster's done really well, I think. He's been pretty impressive with how he's picked it up, but he's just slowly progressed more and more as the race has gone on. He hasn't tried to get to the front in one race, which is a key thing, whereas I think a couple of guys have come in and tried to do that and hasn't worked, and that's why they haven't lasted.
So I guess probably the next question that I would ask is this. I mean, fans love S5000. Like, I mean, the people that talk about it, like we've had Mawson on, we've had Hearn on who's raced it, we've had Cameron on who's raced it, we've had you on, all say how awesome it is. Do you reckon that, or why do you think it's struggled relatively to build its grid? Because at the front, like I said, the racing is so good.
Yeah, for me, I think it's because of the category in a way that it's its own path, I guess you'd say. It doesn't really have a set place in terms of where you want to end up. I think it's actually a very good platform for supercars. You know, if you can drive an S5000, you can drive a supercar, no worries at all. I get in the supercar and it's it's like getting in a limo.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
much easier to drive, just in terms of the margin for error is a lot bigger. Whereas in the S5000, it's pretty small. You got to really know for sure what you can do in it. You never go through a corner and think, oh, I'll give it a bit more throttle, unless you know you can get away with it.
Yeah.
Whereas in a supercar, you can probably squeeze it a bit, have a slide and keep going. Whereas the S5000 will be all over before you know it.
Do you think it'll become a legitimate pathway to supercars?
Hopefully I can legitimize it by getting back into supercars.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, Thomas Randall, he raced S5000,
that's
he's
right.
in supercars now.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it hasn't really had a proper chance yet, and it does need more cars on the grid to give it the proper exposure and chance to show really that it is important and actually does lead to other categories. And that's the reason I think why it probably hasn't picked up, is because all these young drivers coming up, they want to be in something that gets them to where they want to end up. They don't want to just race something because they're the best cars. Let's race that, and then what? You know, everyone wants to become a professional at the end of the day. Myself, obviously, I built the professionalism through supercars, which I've still got now, racing S5000. But the other young guys, they need to be in as high a profile category as they can to make money.
It's
I
probably
suppose one thing with when you're wishing for bigger, I like I can't get a word in if I don't cut you off, mate. You just keep rambling. Just go. Well, the next logical question is yada yada yada. I suppose one thing you have to think about when you're talking about building the grid though is that you don't want to build a grid and then like you want the right people in there, like good drivers, not people who are going to crash. I think one thing that like the TCRs this year and even the sort of the Trans Ams who you ran with run with now, like we've seen this year especially, is the racing can be hampered when there's a lot of sort of incidents on track and it doesn't really showcase the category in the best light. Not in the best light, but just makes it look a little bit, you know, I don't know what you call it, amateurish.
Yep.
So like, you'd sort of, there's one thing in wishing in for bigger grids, but you wouldn't want to go to the extent like we're going to take extra 7 cars on and then you're going to lose running because there's more yellow flags or just the wrong people in those cars. I suppose that's like sort of the juggle with it, especially with how you're saying how finally you have to drive them because, you know, they'll spit you out real quick.
Yep. No, you're spot on there. It's important to get drivers that are capable, because as soon as you get one that isn't, we spend more time under red flag and safety car than we do doing flying laps. So that's the other probably hard thing as well. The young guys that would jump at another category aren't all sort of capable of doing it.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why the numbers probably aren't quite there. But I think, I mean, I still believe it's gonna go well. It really needs probably another 5 or so competitive cars. You know, if you have 14 cars every round consistently, with 10 of them being pretty competitive, some maybe slightly off the pace, but it's still going to be much healthier. And as long as you do get drivers that are capable and you're not losing racing laps, which we have seen a lot of times, but there are incidences that possibly could have been avoided, but their cars are so hard to drive that I've been off the track in one. There's not anyone that hasn't had a moment in them. That's just because of how hard they are to drive. So I mean, someone like Cooper's a perfect example. He's a young guy that's come in, hasn't done anything stupid, and just slowly, step by step, worked his way up. And that's what the other guys need to be doing.
I think he's driven within himself a bit too, which is probably very prudent. I think what you said just before about S5000 not really getting the chance to show how good it is, it's a really good one. I mean, in a weird way, it was probably 2 days away from actually having the chance to highlight the world. Back when the Australian Grand Prix was supposed to take place 2 years ago, we had a number of international drivers coming in for the event as well, and it kind of looked like it was going to be an awesome category at the Grand Prix 2 years ago. And realistically, this is probably the first chance that it's had again to really showcase itself at like a premier event. And I mean, obviously today there was news that Aaron Cameron's racing again. I think Parguan has got a car racing at the Grand Prix as well. So how optimistic are you about the category, particularly having the chance and optics to race at the Grand Prix again?
Oh, I think it'll be awesome and probably better again than when it had the first opportunity that got cut short. From what I hear, this is going to be the biggest Melbourne Grand Prix that they've had in the last 20 years. To be racing as part of it, it's probably going to be the biggest event that I've raced at, other than Bathurst 1000, which I'd assume wouldn't have as many people as what there will be this weekend. So I'm just going to try and enjoy it, and I think it will be really good for the category, and hopefully we can have some clean racing and put on a good show and get some more fans and drivers on board.
Actually
there-
excited to see them live again because we saw them at Sydney Motorsport Park. We came last year and watched you guys. I'm going down to Melbourne. I actually can't wait for these to watch the S5000. So
Should be good.
They're fun as hell to watch. Like they must
Mm.
be insane to drive. But even just watching them going through that first corner at Eastern Creek last year, I mean, bloody hell, you got to have some balls to drive those things. I reckon, like some serious balls.
Mm.
All right, but so let's think. Just have it's not a reflection, but think about your career moving forward. Obviously, the immediate future is S5000. Realistically speaking, and talking like obviously you've spoken about the financial side of supercars and the difficulty that comes with collecting the funds and things like that. When do you think is going to be your next, I don't know, realistic step to kind of push for another seat in the category? Is there anything opening up next year, considering that kind of everyone's staying status quo for Gen 3?
He's going to be racing for Boost Mobile Racing because they're going to need new drivers next year, I think.
No, they're going pretty good actually. Yeah, I mean, I'm putting 110% in to getting back on the grid, just like I have the last 2 years. But yeah, it's really about getting the right place at the right time and all those other things off the track, the sponsorship stuff. The more you can do there, the harder you can work. The easier it's going to make it. And people can look at it from the outside, and he's bringing this sponsorship and he's not bringing as much or whatever. But at the end of the day, whether the team finds a sponsor or the driver finds a sponsor, someone's got to find it. Otherwise, no one's going anywhere. And back in the day, it was fortunate that it was healthy enough that the teams got all the big sponsors on and they picked which driver they wanted and paid them a really good wage. There might be a small few teams that still do that now, but majority, it's not the case. But there's still people making good money and remaining professionals in a sport that needs to be a professional sport. So yeah, back to your question, I sort of went off the path a bit there, but yeah, I'm just really continuing on with what I'm doing now and staying as sharp as I can so that when the opportunity does come about, that I'm ready to go. And I think with Gen 3 coming in, that's another awesome opportunity for me to show what I can do with a sort of clean slate, new car, everyone's even. Everyone's got the same cars. There's no discrepancies between engines and, Holden to Holden now. They've got different front end suspensions. They got different roll bar systems. They got different intake manifolds, and they're both Holdens.
Yeah.
So all that stuff will be thrown out the window, and it'll become a lot closer to a one make category. You still have your Ford and Holden, but they'll all be identical. And yeah, it'd be really good to get into that. That's what I'm aiming for and working towards.
Well, first off, it sounded like you were subliminally asking for cigarette sponsorship to come back into the sport because that's when there was plenty of cash flowing around. I've got a question for you actually. I didn't realize, looking back on, I suppose, how young you were when you actually entered the sport. I watched the video of your crash at Sandown. And how old were you then? Like 18 or something? 17, 18 back then?
Nah, I was.
Were you just a very young looking fella?
Actually, I think I was 19 then.
You're
Yeah.
19. What is it like for a 19-year-old to have such an impact? That is a massive crash. And then I think, did you have the crash at Bathurst the same year up the top?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. What is it like for a 19-year-old to go through, like big high impact crashes like that? I mean, I suppose not.
To be honest, it's probably
of your life.
more going through the emotional side of, being at those big events and having things go wrong is probably a bigger thing to go through than the actual crash itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the cars are pretty safe now. It's particularly supercars. You got the roll cage and windscreen and stuff. S5000 obviously got the halo and that, which makes them nice and safe, but you're still exposed at the end of the day when you're doing 300 or whatever. Things can go wrong, so it's all part of the job.
Is
Those
a
crash-
is a is an event like last year's Bathurst when where your sort of event is over before it really begins more painful because you never even really had a chance to sort of showcase yourself?
Yeah, it was. But I was lucky that I got to race S5000 same weekend
Yeah.
and
Okay.
won that. But yeah, it's a pain in the bum because it's the race that stops the nation, isn't it? It's the one we all
Literally.
wait for every year. And yeah, you could look at it one positive. At least it didn't happen on the last lap, and we were going for a podium or something. But that's about the only
suppose so.
positive, I reckon.
the crazy thing about it, particularly like you look at like Lee Holdsworth, right? And he was obviously doing TCR and had a great Bathurst race. And because it's only the one race that you guys get to showcase yourself, that literally got him a seat this year. And
Yep.
and for someone that's like pushing, trying to stay relevant, to have it like taken away from you before you even get the chance. And you guys looked pretty competitive as well before that. So to not even have the chance must be absolutely like gut wrenching, and it's something that's completely out of your control.
Yeah, yeah, it's disappointing, and yeah, that is a perfect example of being in the right place at the right time, and it works out, and off you go. Lee's fortunate enough to have been racing in supercars for a long time, so he's pretty experienced. But yeah, it just goes to show you just keep pushing and never give up. He probably dropped out of supercars when he didn't really deserve to either. But yeah, he didn't give up, and that's why he's back in there. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Probably helped that he had a car that was a second lap faster too.
I suppose even like your last teammate in supercars, Richie Stanaway, sort of his whole Tickford move got solidified after their victory at Sandown, and he had a pretty good showing at Bathurst as well. So it's there's been a few drivers in the last sort of couple of years who have definitely made a push for a full-time seat through the enduro season. I suppose now the thing is there's only one race, not three, where you can sort of build up some momentum, which probably hurts you more.
Yeah, it makes it hard. But as I said before, it's unfortunately it is more off the track now, and yeah, you gotta still do a good job at Bathurst, but if you don't have something sorted by the time you get to Bathurst for the following year, it's probably not going to happen anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just to finish, are you racing the whole Australian Karting Championship this year?
Yep, the whole one. So I'm currently sitting second in the championship behind Josh Fife.
Is that
And is
why
that
you didn't
just-
enter F? Because you saw.
Pardon?
Is that why you didn't enter? Because you saw James was racing, you thought I can't beat him.
Yeah. Shut up, you idiot. Shut up, you idiot.
It's because you don't have your seat adjuster.
Pardon?
If you get his seat adjuster, then you'll be able to race against him.
Oh, you know,
So,
so you remember that race we did at Lithgow 2 years ago when my seat broke underneath me?
Yeah.
We put that bodgy one up really quickly. That seat adjuster would have been useful then. But anyway, I digress. James, thanks so much for your time tonight, mate. And we wish you the best of luck, obviously, for the Grand Prix this coming weekend, obviously for the season ahead, and then more importantly, moving forward, as you push for another seat in supercars. I mean, we're really grateful to have people like you come on the pod, share your story. I mean, we're pretty much nobodies. So for you to spend an hour of your time, shooting the shit with us is really appreciated. And we just, wish you all the best of luck moving forward. So thanks for your time, mate.
thanks, boys. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, happy to jump on anytime. You guys are the ones that are putting our sports out there in front of everyone or in their ears. So appreciate what you guys do and look forward to seeing you at the track soon.
Cheers, buddy.
Thank you very
If
much,
need a-
Thanks, mate.
if you need a platform to plug your seat adjusters, just let us know as well.
Yeah, fastadjusters.com.au. Cheers,
Oh,
boys.
that's right. There you go. Good to hear. All right, mate. Thanks so much for your time.
Cheers, boys. See ya.
Have a great
Thanks,
night.
James.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers,
See ya.
buddy.